On this episode of Friend Code, we'll answer whether or not Nintendo would divide the Switch install base with a new model, what upcoming releases could be exclusive to this new model, and what does Sony's acquisition of EVO mean for the future of Smash in the fighting game community. Hey everyone, I'm Michael Damiani. This week I'm joined by Simmons of YoVideoGames. How's it going?
Hello. Hey guys.
And first-timer content creator JakeJames Lugo. How's it going, dude?
Hey, I appreciate you having me on here. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. Nice to meet you both in digital forms. That's pretty dope.
You're
as much as we can, it's the best we can do still. So.
Right? For real.
I was gonna say you're actually friends with Stealth.
Yes.
I was
my
like,
man.
yeah, because Stealth, we've had Stealth on quite a few times. Stealth's a great person. Always a blast to have on. You know, like I was like when I heard, oh, you know, check out Jake James. Is like, all right, yeah. It's like, yeah. I'm like always looking for new people to like talk about because I love meeting new people, or not just into games, but like Nintendo stuff. Like Nintendo fans, you know, enthusiasts. Like we, you know, I feel like we have a special bond sometimes.
For real.
We go through some stuff. We go through some stuff sometimes. I was gonna say. But we got some news to talk about. And I'm gonna remind our listeners that, okay, I did make a rule. I said until Nintendo officially talked about a new Switch model, we wouldn't cover the rumors. But you know what? This really isn't so much a rumor. This is like a report. And Bloomberg, when it comes from Bloomberg and it comes from these sources, they've been like, the history speaks for itself. So you know what? I feel this is pretty big to talk about because it raises a very important question. I'm obviously referring to the Bloomberg report about the enhanced Switch model, which is being dubbed the Switch Pro by everyone. Just to recap, if you're not familiar, if you didn't see the report, says a new Switch model with a bigger Samsung OLED display is due out by the end of 2021. It'll be a 7-inch screen, 720p resolution. It will consume less battery life, offer higher contrast, possibly a faster response time for touch inputs. They're going with rigid OLEDs, which are cheaper than the ones you find in high-end smartphones. And I think the biggest thing of all this, it also says when docked, it will support 4K resolution. So for like 4K Switch, like that's got to be exciting to hear. But also, what?
Well, it's quite a jump, right? Because they're not increasing the resolution of the the screen in handheld mode, and then it's going to jump to 4K. So it's not like 1080p to 4K; it's 720 to 4K. So that's what makes it interesting in a way. And the thing that makes to me the most believable thing about all this, I mean, this is no longer a rumor. This is just sort of like worst kept secret in the industry now. Is that, okay, they did it because Samsung had a bunch of rigid OLED screens they needed to get rid of. And Nintendo was like, oh, you gonna wholesale them on the cheap? Okay, yeah, that sounds good for us. I'm like, that's the most Nintendo sounding thing about this whole thing. Is that like, okay, yeah, because at first I was like, there's no way Nintendo's gonna go OLED. I mean, that's so fancy for them, you know. Usually, they're kind of like whatever's the most efficient. And then they're like, well, Samsung's just trying to offset a whole bunch of these screens, and they're only 720p still. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that does sound like Nintendo. So
Let's keep also in mind, like, Nintendo's still a company. They're still a business. So if they could do something that's beneficial to them and save money, which they're going to be saving a boatload of money by doing this, and be having like a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to better their product overall, especially in the eyes of the public, why not? Like, it's a win-win for them no matter what.
Yeah, because some people, it's been a long time, but a lot of people sometimes seem to get in their heads like, why aren't they cutting edge? I'm like, well, Sega used to try to be like super cutting edge on some of this technology and stuff like that, and it didn't always work out. So Nintendo's very conservative. Miyamoto himself actually spoke about this at the last investors meeting, where he brought up something he learned from Gunpei Yokoi, where he was talking about lateral technology, where it's like we take existing technology and try to think laterally on it. It's sort of like a philosophy that they've had for 40 years. Where they're like they'd rather try to do something new and interesting with technology they already have rather than be bleeding edge. And the Switch itself, from what I understand, it kind of was created from that same mindset. Because if you remember way back when the Switch, before it was out, NVIDIA kind of had lost all of its partnerships with video gaming, right? First, they provided the original GPU for the original Xbox, and then Microsoft with AMD for all the future Xbox systems. And then Sony had a NVIDIA, tech for the PS3, but then they lost that for the PS4. So it was AMD across the board, for Nintendo, for Wii U, Sony, and Microsoft. And then, so from what I understand, like NVIDIA was kind of told by like some of their shareholders and whatever, like, you need to make a deal right now with one of these major video game publishers, and they had the Tegra chip. So they were kind of like, it was more like beneficial for NVIDIA, than Nintendo, but Nintendo was like, oh, this is a great deal. You really need to sell a chipset to a video game manufacturer. We're looking for one. Let's do it. So it almost seems like the same situation here with the new OLED screen, where it's like Samsung's looking to offset these rigid screens. NVIDIA was looking to like make some deal with anyone they could, and it just sort of like everything just sort of came together, fell in place.
Timing. Big timing, good timing for them, especially Nintendo. Again, Nintendo wins out on all this. They come out pretty good.
Yeah, it also wins. It also helps because Nintendo, they don't need an OLED screen, right? They didn't, necessarily like it was. I don't think that was vital to like a new system launch model, but it's certainly beneficial for them, and it's beneficial for Samsung. So it's kind of like turning into this win-win scenario here. Mm-hmm. And just. I guess the whole point generally is just like this is cool, but it's like for some people who might be a little disappointed that it's 720p. I'm like, look, Nintendo is about making what's the best move for them business wise, because and then that can offset, that can come back to us too, because
I was about to ask that, like, a good question that a lot of people are probably reading this report or hearing about it through us. It's like, okay, is that going to affect the price as me as a consumer going out to buy a Switch? And I'm not just talking about just one model. I mean all models like after that's going to have this stuff in there, including the regular Switch model and the Switch Lite, because I'm assuming, or at least going with the guess, that all this stuff is going to be implemented to all Switch models afterwards, kind of like what with PlayStation 4 Pro, like most models ended up being like the default PlayStation 4 at some point. So it's just an interesting question. I'd be curious to know if maybe as we get towards like E3 time, as like more details start to come out about this, or more official like details like outside of just Bloomberg, where they start to talk about it a little bit more, and maybe that'll be something to really entice more people to dive into it if they haven't already.
Yeah. No, I mean, we should, if this report is to be believed, we should be hearing about this sometime in the near future, because according to the report, these will go into production as early as June. With the screens, the OLED screens being shipped out in July to assemblers to start assembling the systems. And Furukawa did say back in February that Nintendo has no plans to announce a new Switch anytime soon, but which
was a huge difference from the year before, where he said we have no plans to launch a new model this year.
It's all in the semantics.
Yeah,
it's all in the semantics, I feel like.
Exactly. But what you both were talking about here, both Simmons, you talking about Nintendo doing what's best for them and being smart with their resources, and also JakeJames, what you were saying about how is this going to impact all the other models, brings us to our first patron question about if this is true, especially the 4K part. This comes from JG. Hey, allies. I feel that Nintendo probably won't introduce an updated model that'll run games exclusively on it. They have gained such a large install base with the Switch. Why would they suddenly release games exclusively for an entirely new platform?
I can answer this.
I think the Switch Pro will have things like a better screen and better resolutions, but I don't expect anything that will divide the install base.
Exactly. Like, look at new Nintendo 3DS. That was the exact same thing that came up with that model of the 3DS. I think there was like only maybe 2 or 3 games that were specifically, and that was like Xenoblade Chronicles, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, and maybe one other one. And then you never saw any other 3DS games get made specifically for new Nintendo 3DS, because everybody said the exact same thing. Why would you do that? Like, why would I have to go for these like maybe 1 or 2 games? Do I have to go buy a whole nother model of the 3DS, even though it's still like an improvement? It just made no sense to do that. And I don't foresee them doing the same mistake.
I think Hyrule Warriors actually did run on old 3DS, but it ran
Yeah, but it
like
wasn't as good.
super.
It was
like
garbage
super
compared.
terrible. Apparently, it was like you don't even bother.
Yeah.
there was weird stuff too though that Nintendo did with new Nintendo 3DS, which I think you're right. I don't think they're gonna drop into that. I hope they don't make the same mistake. Where like Binding of Isaac was one game that I can think of off the top of my head. I don't even know why it was exclusive, but like they had Super Nintendo titles.
Oh yeah, I
that you could
remember
download
this.
that would only run on the new Nintendo 3DS and not on the original 3DS models, which I was like, why? That always was super bizarre to me, because I'm like, I don't think Super NES games are so resource intensive that the 3DS base model couldn't handle them.
Yeah, I got a list, by the way, if you want the full list. I don't have to read
man.
it, but apparently there were 51 titles available, 4 released at retail, and obviously the SNES stuff you were talking about as well.
Yeah, super bizarre. I originally was like, I would bet money that there would be no exclusive games for the Switch Pro, but then there were other people like that were sort of like in the industry that were kind of like hinting that maybe that's not entirely true. Now this is like getting into real rumor. I don't personally think my personal gut is I don't think Nintendo will publish any first party exclusives for the new model.
I agree.
I think just not, probably not. I think they'll certainly be beneficial, games that benefit from being on the Pro versus not being on it. But
It's like PS4 and PS4 Pro. That's the exact same type of thing. Like, look at the current Switch now. It could run something like The Witcher 3, at least at a good way. Like, doesn't look fidelity-wise, visually, doesn't look as good as like on the other consoles, but you can still play that. You can still play Doom on there. So it's not a garbage system. It's not like it can't run games
That's
in
true.
that way.
And also,
so again, I just find the similarity to that type of parallel.
And the other thing is we're seeing the emergence of like cloud gaming. Nintendo did do, Hitman 3 and Control cloud editions. So there is even a workaround, even like on older, like a Switch Lite, you could play like these games and stuff. So that's obviously dependent on your internet connection.
Yeah,
But
I think we actually might see more of that in a weird way, where it'll run kind of like on a Switch Pro, but they'll have a cloud version for older models. Like, and I don't think, and this is probably just going to be third party. I don't think Nintendo will ever do this. But like, say if some third party game, like they just couldn't get it to run at any decent, fidelity on the base model. They're like, well, we'll have a cloud version, and then we'll have this version, and like I could maybe see a scenario where that kind of comes up a little bit.
Yeah, maybe
We have games like that now. Like again, look at Spider-Man Miles Morales. It runs better and like much more nicer on PlayStation 5 as opposed to PlayStation 4. Like that's a perfect example right there.
Yeah.
You know what I think is interesting though? That might be something to think about. What if they had like exclusive accessories for the Switch Pro? For the second model of the Switch. Like, if we're still able to play all the games we want on both models, but getting a Switch Pro, maybe there's other accessories and other stuff they could probably offer that allows something a little bit different. Because remember,
like
a couple of things I've
Joy-Cons?
seen people talk about is like certain things kind of like, Nintendo's never really dived into virtual reality. They haven't really dived into VR like that. Imagine something like that, maybe implemented with like Labo or something, where you could have that running with a Switch Pro that you couldn't do on the previous Switch. Just spitfire idea, but something to think about.
I could see where maybe if it does have beefier hardware, that maybe they do a little bit more with what they've tested with VR than before.
Yeah, didn't they do that thing with Labo or whatever? I thought they did some pseudo
They have
thing.
VR, they do, and like they have like a pseudo VR thing you can do with Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey and Smash Brothers Ultimate. But it's very minor. It's very minor.
It's not like what we get with PSVR or something. Or like
right.
Yeah, I don't know. Nintendo's not really been adamant about VR. What they have been adamant about is like in the past, and especially now with their new amusement park, is AR. I think maybe they could do something with that. There's maybe a camera or something on this. They could go with that, especially since it's taken on the go. We've seen the success of Pokemon Go. Maybe they want to do something like that, and like that's a weird gimmicky feature that it pays off for them. But I think
imagine that with Animal Crossing. Imagine that with Mario Kart. I mean, now they're doing it with Mario Kart with like that.
Yeah,
Animal Crossing would be the first game I could think of. That could benefit
I'm
from
actually shocked that the Switch itself didn't come with a camera. Like the DSi did and the 3DS did. I'm actually kind of shocked that they never put a camera on it. And the only reason they may not do it is because for cost cutting measures.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
That's
unless
the thing,
they do
yeah.
want to dive really hard into AR.
Maybe getting the new parts with like the OLED stuff that'll give them the ability to maybe think about that stuff, because remember they're saving
Maybe.
money by having
Yeah.
those parts and that other stuff. So maybe that could be another kind of perk to getting the new type of Switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I could definitely see that being part of like a presentation, like at an E3 style, showcase where they're like the new model. And it's like, well, like, how do you advertise a new model? Because they're going to do like their really like big lifestyle video, where a bunch of like beautiful people, and all these like urban and like country areas are going to be like playing the Switch, like all super infomercial style. But it's like they're going to advertise it. What's one thing they could do, like taking pictures and then showing all these AR features? I could see that being, I could actually see that being like this sort of like sideways thing, like no one's talking about it, no one really expected, but hey, all of a sudden it has a camera and now it has all these weird AR features that it's doing and stuff. So I actually, that would not surprise me one bit, if that just suddenly appeared on the Switch Pro.
So let me ask you both about this then. So it seems both of you personally are convinced they're not going to divide the install base. And I think most rational people would say that's pretty crazy of Nintendo to do, especially when their goal is to maintain momentum. So I got a question from Joseph Caruso about what is this bump really going to mean for, games in terms of fidelity. So first, they want to clarify, originally the rumors of an upgraded Switch model utilizing NVIDIA's DLSS technology to upscale the resolution of games using AI was exciting and seemed feasible to someone like me. I've seen how effective the technology is on PC games, and it has improved significantly over the past year. However, on a recent Digital Foundry podcast, the much more technologically knowledgeable panel said to not get too excited about DLSS. Based on the hardware required and software support, it really isn't something that can just be turned on easily or even included in a handheld device or the Switch dock. So now I'm anticipating the rumored Switch Pro will have pretty limited visual upgrades similar to the new 3DS. So their question is this: how much of an improvement in visuals do you think is required for the enthusiast crowd to get an upgraded Switch?
That's a good question, because I don't think like you need a huge jump for that already hardcore Nintendo fan base, because they're going to dive in regardless. Like there's just a certain extreme that's going to be in with it regardless. I think that if the visual fidelity, like just the look, the overall aesthetic isn't improved that much, what about the smoothness of those worlds? Like imagine being able to play something like Breath of the Wild or Breath of the Wild 2, just for say example, or Pokemon Legends, where there's hardly any loading, there's hardly any kind of like pickups here and there, there's hardly any kind of like pop in and stuff, or anything that we could think of that would be a problem with a larger world. Because again, Pokemon Legends, Breath of the Wild, games like Witcher 3, these are all large worlds running on that handheld or running on that portable device. So sometimes it's not always going to run as smooth, but maybe with all this extra stuff, it'll be in the same type of vein as what we got on some of the other consoles. That's just clean, crisp, nice, populated, dense, and lively.
I think the DLSS thing, that depends entirely on what the new hardware inside it is about. Like it may be tailored. We may be getting like a tailored custom NVIDIA chip that's all about the DLSS, but unless that was like in the design doc from the beginning, then I think your reader has a point there where it's like, yeah, I don't think it's something you can just turn on or off. Like this had to have been if the DLSS was something, it would have been something they were planning from the start. Like it would have been integral to the core design of whatever new chip is in there. But yeah, like personally for me, I'm more about performance than upgrade. I think the general, not Nintendo fan, but general video gamers always wanting better better graphics. Like Reggie would make this point in during every E3 interview where he's like, they always want more. They always want the cutting edge. And I'm like, to just. So, like, in one sense, there's nothing Nintendo could do that will ever truly satisfy everyone as far as graphics go, because there'll be plenty of people who will sit there and they don't really know too much about how gaming technology works and just be like, well, why doesn't it look as good as a PS5? That's like, this is coming out after the PS5. It's like, that's not how it works. So there's always going to be that sort of like, that sort of problem where it's like, no, this thing will not look as good as PS5 or the Series X. It's it's I personally don't even think it's really probably even going to hit the specs of a PS4 Pro. Personally, I don't. It's not going to hit anything like that either. But performance can help, and I think kind of going to what Jake was saying is that I was it really started to hit me the last couple of months. Seeing the performance of Age of Calamity and Bowser's Fury were like something was going really wrong during my playthrough on stream, and it dropped to 5 frames. I'm not even kidding.
Yikes.
5 frames. It was a glitch. It was not normal. Like something definitely happened. But that happened, and then we kind of saw a little bit, from the trailer with Pokemon Legends. I'm like, it's starting to feel like, okay, like when the first party games they're starting to chug. I'm like, maybe just we need to get this thing up to a standard fidelity, like a smooth 30 even, let alone not even thinking about that glorious 60 frames, but like a smooth 30 would be really beneficial to games like Age of Calamity and like Pokemon Legends, in particular.
At least a consistent 30.
A consistent or closer, something like approaching consistent, 30. So I think that's a real advantage, because the thing is Nintendo's not. I mean, this is gonna sound mean, but I'm like, they're not Ubisoft. They don't like to show you footage of a game that doesn't ever really look like what the launch version looks and runs like. So Nintendo's actually generally pretty good about, they show you what the game looks like when they show off video games at E3 and stuff. They're usually showing it on actual hardware
when they're ready. Yeah,
and very rarely, I mean, it happens, but rarely do I see a Nintendo game where they showcase in detail a Nintendo first party title, and it is significantly better looking and better running than the version we get on launch. That doesn't happen a lot with Nintendo. So being as sort of honest as they kind of are, which is nice, I think they also don't want to be showing off Breath of the Wild 2 or maybe later Splatoon 3 and whatever, and it's going to have these chugging moments, kind of like Bowser's Fury kind of does and stuff. I think they want to have a pro version of the system where it's when they showcase a game, they'll have a little tagline saying captured on Switch Advanced or whatever it is, that it'll look smooth. They don't have to sit there and run games that are already starting to show wear and tear. I don't know if this is a term for it, but I think Switch Pro might be good for them, because they're going to be able to showcase first party titles running at a much smoother frame rate and fidelity. So even if it doesn't look like a PS5 game, it's still good. At least it's going to look consistent with its performance.
I have a comment from a patron, from Ricardo Toro, that I wasn't originally going to include, but I think it makes sense with this question. Other factors to maybe consider. So I'm trusting them on this about OLED technology with OLED screens, but they want to point out that HDR can actually become a real possibility with OLED screens. Both when it comes to handheld and docked mode, which could be a game changer. Though adding it to potentially older games might be a little bit harder to do. They want to acknowledge that, but it is something that could be possible. Also, excuse me, they talk about another potential benefit of an OLED panel is a wider color gamut. So Nintendo, getting that vibrance, getting that that richer
contrast.
Gain and contrast. Exactly, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Which might be a better benefit than higher resolution per se. So those are some other factors they wanted us to consider, and I think they're good points. Just image quality. IQ is a pretty important thing, and it's not always just resolution.
True.
I think Mario Kart 8, Animal Crossing, and Breath of the Wild, maybe Mario Odyssey might get an HDR patch.
Maybe Smash too. I could see
maybe
totally
Smash.
Something like Smash also. They're popular games overall.
The only I don't think it has any. Yeah, I don't think it would have any issue on performance, but I think maybe for those 20 million plus sellers, they would go back and maybe patch and do an HDR patch for it, which is actually a good point. Something that doesn't get brought up a lot is the fact that with OLED and with all this extra stuff, are we gonna do HDR, especially if we're gonna have a 4K output now? But yeah, I absolutely think that's probably something you could look forward to on the new model. Might be like something they can kind of advertise, like, hey, we got this cool HDR, like better color depth, whatever. If you have, that's one advantage of the new model, is that you can run these games with these settings. Yeah, that's actually a good point. And interestingly, one that I haven't heard brought up a lot, but I think that's it's a good observation. And I do, but yeah, I don't think you'll see a plethora of old games getting HDR patches. It'll just be the 20 plus million sellers.
The ones that are most relevant to them, I feel like. Yeah, like the ones that are most frequently played, that they're always showed with like Switch showcases, like that.
Splatoon
that makes a lot of
2,
sense to
stuff
me.
like that. Yeah.
Let me ask you this to maybe wrap up this segment. I'm kind of paraphrasing from our patron Declan here. The part they asked, I'm cherry picking here, is about release titles. Like we talking about HDR benefiting maybe older titles. What other older titles might benefit just from the Switch Pro, like the bump? Like what titles would you hope to see get more stable frame rate, or that slight visual fidelity?
I can think
bump?
of maybe 3. Like the 3 that was like the most obvious. So, I would say Splatoon 3, since they talked about it. I would say Breath of the Wild 2. And, if I really wanted to be a little picky or like choose something random, I would say also something like Bayonetta 3, games, or Metroid Prime 4, like games that we haven't really seen a whole lot of, or at least we know they're being made, they're being developed, or they've been teased, but just haven't had like a release window or anything. Like they got time to work on those games. So that'd be my picks.
And any already released titles you'd like to see? Maybe like you both talked about Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity. I also I reviewed that. I know that game's a problem with the performance at points. So you think they might like make a bigger deal about like, hey, we're Breath of the Wild's getting a patch update that will improve its performance on Switch Pro ahead of the release of Breath of the Wild 2. Do you think they'll do anything like that, or do you expect any kind of like bump?
This might actually come down to individual teams, like how they feel, or if they want to do it or not. Like internal Nintendo EPD Kyoto teams may not see the necessity for it. But to bring up sort of like old and new, I could definitely see maybe someone else who is close, like either Pokemon Company or maybe not them, but like I could see Monolith Soft actually being one of those people like, maybe we'll do a performance stability increase for some of the two like Xenoblades.
Or Xenogear. Xenoblade Chronicles.
Yeah, both Xenoblades, two chugs a bit in some spots. So, and especially, I don't know if they'll go back and do anything for handheld, because I know handheld performance was a little spotty on launch on Xenoblade 2. I could see that happening. But Takahashi, the guy who founded Monolith Soft, he talked about in an interview with Harada, from Namco, about I think over a year ago. He was talking about how even he was sort of whining about a little bit about hardware, where it's just like he kind of wished he could work on some of the more like cutting edge stuff. So it was a weird thing, a really weirdly honest interview where he talked about like kind of like wishing he could use a little more juice to power up his game worlds and stuff. And I think, okay, well, that's to me, I'm like, that's probably a good indication of what's going on there with Breath of the Wild 2, and B, probably with Xenoblade 3, and kind of like going back to what you were saying. I think the reason we actually haven't seen Bayo 3 and Metroid Prime 4 and Breath of the Wild 2 since their announcements, I think the reason we haven't seen them is I think they are holding it back for this advanced model. I'm sure Nintendo knew this advanced model was coming probably years ago. They're always kind of like tinkering around for the future, whether it pans out or not. But like they probably knew it was going to happen, and things like Breath of the Wild 2, Xenoblade 3, Metroid Prime 4, Bayonetta 3, those are all first-party games that will definitely benefit from added horsepower. Much more so because if Animal Crossing is a game that thing's not going to benefit at all from a Switch Pro. Like maybe they'll do something with like HDR or something, but like that's a game that doesn't need the Pro model for anything. And like even games like Mario Golf or whatever, and there's so many other first party games that they're not really gonna make. There's not gonna be any advantage that this advanced hardware is going to bring to a lot of their really good selling titles, like Super Mario. Like, I'm sure there'll be a Super Mario Party 2 coming at some point. Super Mario Party 2 is an inevitability, like Thanos. So, but I don't think that's a title that's necessarily like, here's, play, it'll have all these great new features or run so much better on Switch Pro. I'm like, no, like that thing's gonna look and run probably mostly the same on either model. So they're gonna have games that will really sell like on their own merits. They're not going to need this boost. But Bayo 3, Xenoblade 3's Breath of the Wild 2, that's gonna probably much more benefit from beefier hardware.
We've been referencing a lot of games here, and I want to move into like the second part of this discussion, the second Bloomberg report that says Nintendo's targeting a record year, and that they expect to beat their 2021 fiscal year, which is wrapping up right now, which had an estimated 205 million units of software for their record fiscal year 2021. They're expecting to break that record with 250 million units, which would be by the end of March 2022. They expect to achieve this with boosted sales from the new Switch model, which we've been talking a lot about, and marquee game releases. According to Sirkin Toto of Content Games Incorporated, a game consultancy, they say Nintendo will need to start the next fiscal year without Animal Crossing and Pandemic, but that will be offset by a much stronger blockbuster software lineup and their new hardware. So this blockbuster software lineup, we obviously had a Nintendo Direct this year. We've had a Pokemon Direct, and we've seen some of their offerings through 2022, but obviously not enough to justify what we're seeing here. So my question is, you've mentioned some obvious candidates. What do you expect out by the end of this fiscal, by March 2022? And when do you think we're going to be hearing about these? And, do you have any guesswork or insight into why
right now,
Nintendo's holding back?
Honestly, I say that by June E3 time is when we start to see and start to hear those teases and start to show like those teaser trailers and stuff for what will be for this holiday season into the spring of next year. I think that's pretty obvious because we're gonna get a digital E3 event more that they've already talked about, and I'm pretty sure everybody, including Nintendo, is gonna show something during then, and they're probably gonna at least talk about stuff that we already know about, maybe a few more details, but we'll probably get to see those extra tidbits of games we wanted to see for a while. So, like we mentioned, Metro Prime 4, like we mentioned, Breath of the Wild 2, maybe Bayonetta 3, since Homeboy was talking about that not too long ago. Not to think about it because it'll take longer, but I feel like that's like something as we start to get more towards this holiday season, we'll see those games. So, I mean, if you're going to hype up or you're going to talk about officially a brand new model of your console, a brand new model of the Switch, I feel like that's one way to get people excited. If you're going to talk about expecting to break those records that you set previously beforehand, they better come out swinging, is all I'm saying.
This is interesting where he says he's going to break the software. We're almost going to like, okay. Now that to go back to that Nintendo Direct, it was good. I liked that Nintendo Direct. It was nice, but it was not full of blockbuster marquee titles. Going up through from what we saw from them, like Splatoon 3 will do very well next year. But like Mario Golf and Skyward Sword HD are games. They'll be great games. I don't think they're going to.
They're not that level of hype.
Right, they're not that level of hype. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. So here's the thing: they're not going to get any title. Animal Crossing is a phenomenon. And here's the other problem. Like the only thing, and I kind of want to bring something up, is that when you look at first party output, they did talk about 2022 titles like Splatoon 3 and then Square Enix's Project Triangle. I think that's what it's called for now.
Project Triangle Strategy.
Yeah, Project Triangle Strategy. I think they changed the name recently or something like that.
No, that was Project Athia became Forspoken.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing. From July, which is when Skyward Sword HD comes out, to this nebulous 2022 for Splatoon 3, and you could sort of technically throw Pokemon in there, although Pokemon is not... A lot of people don't realize that Pokemon's not entirely first party. They don't actually make 100% of the profits off a Pokemon game, Nintendo themselves. It's a partnership, not a first party. Anyways, from July to 2022, there's this wide gap of first party content, like where we don't know. We know Diamond and Pearl exist, but again, like kind of going back, like that's not Nintendo doesn't get all the money themselves from Pokemon. So you've got this weird gap of like, okay, they have got to have, like you said, marquee titles. Obviously, I think Breath of the Wild 2 is as a launch game for a Switch Pro. I would put money on that. But there's got to be something else in there if they want to match those 30 million, sales, 30 plus million sales of Animal Crossing alone. To me, that's where like.
I don't think you get third parties to do that, to be honest.
Yeah,
with
you don't, and like, okay, well, Pokemon will help, and Breath of the Wild 2 is gonna be a big thing, especially with like launch hardware. That's important, but there's probably gonna have to be something like a Mario Kart, like honestly, like a big gun like that.
Because huge.
Now here's the thing that it breaks my heart to say this, but. Metroid Prime 4, Bayonetta 3, for me a new Xenoblade, none of those games are going to help push those Animal Crossing sales. Like they're not huge.
I think that's
sellers.
fair to say.
Like,
I think honestly that's a fair thing to say because I think that it's the vocal minority of Nintendo fans that really love those games for obvious reasons like that.
Yeah.
But those games don't appeal to the masses that are not the hardcore Nintendo fans because Animal Crossing is like a really wide open universal thing for a lot of people. And keep in mind, with the pandemic and all that other stuff going on, that was like a game that was just hitting at the right moment, and that style of game specifically at the right moment.
Yeah, like it's like to me, I'm like, okay, here's what I'm anticipating. It's either going to be something like he's either talking about a Mario Kart or a Mario Party because Mario Party sell extremely well too. So there's going to have to be like basically a couple of games that are half or a third of Animal Crossing's numbers. And that's like, okay, here you're going to hit like a Breath of the Wild, a Super Mario Party 2, maybe a Mario Kart 9, maybe. I'm very iffy about that considering how well 8's still doing. But like that's the kind of level of game you need to be hitting more than what they sold last year. They want to hit that like 250 million software. I'm like, okay, that's going to take like a new 2D Mario plus the new Zelda plus a new Mario Party. Like, unfortunately, it's not these beloved hardcore IPs like Metroid and Bayo that are gonna do it because like the ceiling right now, I don't think Metroid in its life has ever broken 3 million sales.
Yeah.
And Bayo's certainly never done that. Xenoblade's never done it.
I don't think Splatoon's doing that. As much as I love Splatoon.
I think Splatoon 1 and 2 are around 5 million apiece. So they're better, but like we know it's coming next year. So that may not even be within fiscal. I don't anticipate Splatoon 3 launching before April. Because to be in fiscal, maybe it is. Maybe it could be. But like if Splatoon 3 is part of this okay, they're going to sell 250 million software units within the fiscal year. That means Splatoon 3 has to come out, if it's part of it, has to come out before March 31st. That's possible. That's certainly possible. And that would help maybe 5 million. But you're talking like, that's going to help 5 million in this chink of armor of 30 plus for Animal Crossing. So, and maybe Animal Crossing sales are part of this. Like they're also counting, new Animal Crossing sales in this final tally of software they sell, and I'm sure that's part of it.
That definitely will count. Also, just a slight thing real quick, just to point out how big Splatoon is. Splatoon 2's worldwide sales is just shy of 12 million. So,
oh wow! Like
yeah,
I would never expect
Splatoon's actually pretty big, but the point is still valid from Simmons that it might not hit this fiscal year anyway, so it might not even be counting towards that. I do think you're making a great point though, Simmons. Like a lot of the more enthusiast releases aren't going to drive the sales. Well, they could probably be bigger than anyone expected. I fully expect Bayonetta 3, Metroid Prime 4, whenever the heck they come out, to probably be the best-selling entries in those franchises and help propel them to maybe a higher level. Because any of these franchises, I think, have the potential to reach a higher kind of like degree, because Fire Emblem showed me that any series under Nintendo's tenure could be juxtaposed to like a mega franchise. But I think you're getting very close to the truth, because Zelda alone, even it's their big holiday title, I don't think that's enough to drive record sales. I think you're right. I think they do need either a Mario Kart, which would that start cannibalizing Mario Kart 8 sales at the expense? Would it really offset to higher sales? You said a new 2D Mario, which, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe is like just shy of 10 million. But Odyssey is right on everyone's heels with over 20 million. I think a new 3D Mario I think it's another 1-2 combo of Zelda and Mario. New 3D Zelda Mario back to back. And that's like, they do what they did. Like, that's like 40 million copies lifetime there. Like, in a calendar year, in that fiscal year, maybe they do 2025 on their own right there. So that's like them combined.
The reason I said 2D Mario is because sort of besides Odyssey, and I love Odyssey a lot. I'm very happy with the sales of Odyssey, but it's just kind of like going into history, like on the Wii, on the DS, on the 3DS, like the 2D, the new 2D
the
Mario
new Super
series,
Mario Brothers games,
the new Super Mario, they sold so well on the last previous console life cycle. So that's why I'm like, I almost wonder if Nintendo just looks at that and goes, well, 2D generally sells better than 3D. That's why I was just thinking. But I would love a new 3D Mario, obviously, by Nintendo Tokyo. I would really, really love an Odyssey 2 or whatever if they could follow that up. But here's an interesting thing, too, like you said, with the 1-2 punch combo. The best time for Bayo 3, because I don't think Metroid Prime 4 has a prayer of coming out this year.
Yeah, I agree.
But the best time for something like Bayo 3 or one of the more hardcore titles, as we saw really benefited with for the Xenoblade series in 2017, hit it right as close to launch of that new that new hardware as possible.
Yeah.
Because when people buy new hardware, they're kind of like, that's when they're at their most apt to look for what's a cool new game to buy with this new hardware. What's gonna show off this hardware. That's how games like Fantavision sell it all, because people just need to have something they want to show off their new hardware.
That's true.
So this is absolute best time for some of these smaller, and I'm just saying smaller in sales, not in our hearts, but smaller in sales franchises like Bayo 3 and whatnot. Like, this is the perfect time would be as close to that new hardware launching as possible, because that's when people are the most hungry and most apt to just, this is getting great reviews, this has got good word of mouth, this is apparently the showcase for what the new system can do, I'll pick this up with it. So I think Zelda's a given, obviously, and yeah, like people will buy
people
Zelda.
pick up multiple games at the same time, because I know, like, I've done it in the past where when I get a new console, I'll get like maybe 2 games, not just one, so I can switch between stuff. So I could totally see people picking up the first party that they want and then something like a Bayo 3 or something else to go along with it for that, compare contrast.
Yeah.
JakeJames, let me ask you this, because in the past discussion, you've been mentioning a bunch of third-party titles. We talk a lot about first-party here. We haven't, third-party is going to obviously be part of this equation for software sales. I'm kind of curious about potential third-party titles, and I can help kickstart it by saying, there's already the rumored Resident Evil Revelations 3, supposedly, that's going to be exclusive to Switch and be meant for that Switch Pro. What kind of third-party support do you think might actually be there as well, especially with the Switch Pro?
I mean, it's interesting because when I think about it, because I was looking at the schedule of all releases recently for 2021 leading into 2022, and I know we've got some interesting and popular third-party games that are coming to Switch, like just regular Switch in general. I wonder if they're going to include stuff like that. Like, for the biggest one for me, or at least the one I'm most excited about, is No More Heroes 3. That's coming out in August, I believe it is. Stuff like that I think would be kind of cool, or at least could benefit from stuff like that. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, because again, like that later part of the year is so open and stuff, but I would love to see games along that line, at least the more edgier third-party games we would like to see, or I would even say games that have already been out on Switch, like Mortal Kombat 11, could benefit from stuff like that for the new hardware, and other things, again, like we're meant to keep going back to Witcher 3, because that team just loves to improve their games, keep getting it out there for most people, or even something like a Skyrim, or anything of that similar nature, but if I had to choose one, I would say No More Heroes 3.
Yeah, I know some ones that I think Simmons is going to mention. I'll point out one real quick that I think will be a big deal, but doesn't even need a Switch Pro probably whatsoever to run. The Silk Song Hollow Knight follow-up, which is going to be exclusive to Switch at first, so it's console exclusive. So it's hey, this is probably going to sell a good amount. But I also think you're making a great point, JakeJames, about there are a lot of older titles that even haven't come to Switch yet that are like last gen titles that finally might be able to come to Switch. And like, I know there's probably one you'd like to see, Simmons. I think you'd like to see that Nier Replicant, maybe.
Oh,
or
yeah.
Nier
Automata no. I didn't even think of that. That'd be great.
Like Nier getting another wind from stuff
I'll
like
even
that.
Nier Automata.
I'll never forget the Xbox One announcement video where, you had, Saito and Taro, and I forget who the third person was. I think it was Tara. Were announcing the Xbox One release of Nier, and then Taro goes, "I want a Switch version."
Yeah, right. He knows.
And like, I want a Switch version. He's like, "Well, that I think Saito or someone was like from Square was like, or Platinum was like, that's not really up to us. We sure would love to do one, sure," like kind of thing where it's like you're ruining our Xbox announcement.
If they could do that, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. If they could do that and Nier Automata, that'd be awesome.
Because that's a weird game because it's not graphically that impressive, honestly, but it also tends, even on PS4, tends to chug a bit. Like, it actually plays best right now on PS5. They just had a new port come out on PC done by Q-Lock, actually. We just found out on the Game Pass version. So that's a really interesting one there that you bring up, Mike, as far as like past. And here and that actually brings up something I think might be the reason the system exists, I think, overall. And that is, with next gen here, PS5, Xbox Series X, I wonder if there was pressure from some third parties to Nintendo being like, we've been able to scale games pretty amazingly. We've done a great job, but we can only scale so much. And we would really love to have titles on the Switch, but dang it, we can't scale them any further down. And I wonder if maybe that has a little bit to do with why this system exists. Now, there are other factors, of course, but I just wonder if maybe that had a little bit to do with it, because there were certain titles that's like, maybe Platinum looked at it, because Platinum would know, because obviously they're pretty close with Nintendo. They might have sat there and said, like, Nintendo been like, hey, is there any way we could get, a port of Nier on the Switch? And Platinum went like, man, we tried, but it just doesn't, reach a performance level we're happy with, and maybe Nintendo was like, maybe we need like a
I could
model.
believe that. Honestly, I could believe that, because then I'd start to think about it like with other companies like Bandai Namco, which is another one that has a great relationship with Nintendo. Like, there's no Tekken on Switch. Like, imagine if we were able to get Tekken 7 on Switch. That'd be great for a lot of people. Or even other games. There's no Street Fighter as far as I could think of. There's no Street Fighter 5 on Switch, or at least, big massive Capcom game besides like Ultra Street Fighter 2 or the collection and stuff. But games like that have been big on other platforms, I mean, that open up an opportunity for them to at least just get ported over, just to say people could take them with them on the go. I mean, it feels like something that somebody should have that conversation over there.
Yeah, and I honestly think they have been happening. I think it's twofold. I think there probably was pressure from third parties to be like, well, look, we want to put these really great selling titles on our system,
with us.
but it's like we can't scale it down, and if we tried, it would look and run so horribly. It'd look bad on us. We can't. That's
happened already. I mean, look at the WWE games and some of the other games that are just like either too big to be on the Switch cartridge, or just when they finally are on there, they just run like utter trash, like really bad.
Now, the other flip side of this, that the reason this exists at all, and I think this comes from a statement Furukawa gave very recently, where he was like, I'm very aware of our history of writing great success and then nosediving right after it. Because he was basically in referring to how do you keep momentum going, and he's just like, I look at every year as a do or die situation personally, because I've seen what happens to Nintendo in the past, and he says, and he used it even and paraphrased it in the sense of we are all here well aware of our history of like, we have great success, we nosedive, it happened with the Wii to the Wii U. The 3DS had a really rocky start, coming off the huge success of the DS. So I think the Pro is maybe possibly their attempt at not being too far behind, because going back to the Wii, it was this amazing, phenomenal system,
big time,
and it was selling amazing and great, and it had all kinds of momentum all the way up through 2010. 2011 hit and everyone was done. It was over. And Nintendo tried to ride it out a couple more years, but it was kind of obvious that everyone was over it. And then it kind of hit the home that like maybe they should have done a Wii HD a lot sooner than they did. Like maybe they waited a little too long to follow up the Wii, because 2011 was sort of a sparse year if you go all the way back in time, because like they had this incredible 2010. And then 2011 was basically this really sparse year until Skyward Sword came out, and that sold less than half of what Twilight Princess did, even though they had 100 million more people owning the console. So I wonder if if a lot of this is just Nintendo going like, we don't want to be too, we don't want to like wait too long on a good thing. We don't want to sit there and just be like, oh, we're doing so well, we'll always do well. And this is exactly what Furukawa was talking about. Like, we can't sit there and expect to always do well just because we had a super banner year with Animal Crossing. We can't just expect that to be every year. Everything's going to be good. Everything's great. Why worry about it? For him, it's
because
always
we're different. It's going to work out in our favor like that.
So yeah, I think in a weird way, like failure was a great teacher in some respects with the Wii U and the launch or early launch of the 3DS, because now Nintendo, I feel, at least from what they're saying, is they don't want to be, they don't want to be caught blindsided. They don't want to like go, make it all the way to the top of the mountain and then fall right off. They want to keep momentum going. They want to keep people talking about their system, and it's working because here we are.
Yeah. I think you're both are right. I think the obvious answer is that we'll hear more about how Nintendo is going to carry this momentum in summer. At some point like June, July, whenever, just digital E3, or Nintendo wants to do their own little event if they're not going to technically. It's going to be during that. So I fully expect to hear more news about that at that point. But, summer is also a time for a lot of other events to come around, including one that we were kind of expecting to hear about. Its fate, one way or another. I'm obviously referring to the EVO fighting game tournament, Evolution Fighting Game Series, which was supposed to happen last year. COVID hit. Everything got disrupted in the world, including the fighting game scene. Tournaments being canceled left and right. EVO was going to go online, and then the event was canceled following abuse allegations against EVO organizer Joey Coyler. And we've been waiting to see what the fate of EVO is going to be. And just hot off the presses, we find out that Sony Interactive Entertainment and a new esports venture called RTS jointly have acquired EVO. Just to run down a few basics of this acquisition, both Tony and Tom Cannon, co-founders of EVO, will continue to be closely involved as key advisors. Mark Julio will remain as head of business development. EVO will be returning this year as EVO Online, a fully online competition taking place over 2 weekends, August 6th through 8th, August 13th through 15th. Entry to everyone will be free, and it will feature Tekken 7, Street Fighter V Champion Edition, Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate, and Guilty Gear Strive. Now, obviously, this headline raises some questions, and Mark Julio went to Twitter immediately and said, EVO is still open to all platforms. Because there are questions about, are Microsoft and Nintendo fighters allowed to be in here? IGN got Nintendo on the horn and got a statement from them. Nintendo's official statement on the story is, Nintendo has enjoyed engaging with fans at past EVO tournaments and wish the show organizers the best with their new venture. We will continue to assess EVO and other opportunities as we plan for future online and offline Super Smash Bros. Tournament activity.
The response to that statement was hilarious. I saw a few spots. Like the best one for me that I saw was Hungry Boxes, because he did a video reaction to it. He was like, I don't like that statement. And I think that's like the general sentiment for a lot of people, especially Smash fans and Smash competitors, about this, because I think like everybody's got to prepare for the worst. I think there's a lot of wording there that's a little weird. I think that not only things that to look out for is the stuff that both Tony and Tom not talking about, like, coming out and saying like, hey, Smash is going to be okay, or Killer Instinct is going to be okay. Obviously, Markman, like, he's saying that all platforms are welcome and stuff, but it's like, that's not directly answering the question or like directly putting it out there. And the same thing with Nintendo. They're not just saying like, yeah, we'll still have Smash at EVO, or we'll still look forward to seeing Smash at EVO. Like, there's just a lot of things there that just like, it sounds like PR speak. And I think that, even though it's not an answer either way, it's still a good idea to maybe prepare for the worst. I don't think that Smash fans are going to be happy with how this turns out.
I think, if you may, he's already done it, but he ripped the left side of the Band-Aid. Let me pull the whole Band-Aid off for everyone in the Smash community here. I think, not only with EVO, this goes beyond EVO, I think Smash fans probably need to get used to the idea that Smash Brothers Ultimate is, in an official capacity, done after 2021.
I can agree with that.
The last two characters have come out, and I don't think Nintendo's going to. I don't foresee them putting a lot of official effort or anything into anything with Smash Brothers after this year. I think they're going to be like, it's content complete. We've supported it for 3 years since launch. We had a great run. But we're gonna move on. They're kind of probably gonna.
Let me ask you this, Simmons, because I think this is also relevant. Because I saw people talking about this, and I've talked about this in relation to other Smash Brothers events, like with all the other news that happened, like a couple months back with all the different tournaments and stuff. Do you feel like a lot of people, outside of just being upset that the worry about like things changing, like forcibly now being like able to change, because PlayStation now partnering up with someone to buy this event, obviously they're going to cater more to their branding. They're going to cater to more games that are on PlayStation 4s or PlayStation 5s, and that's just business. That's just the nature of the beast. Do you think that it's a combination of that and maybe like all the other stuff that's happened up to this point, where you feel like it's just setting up a bad like outcome for Smash Brothers competitively, where we're only going to really see a lot of just more smaller type of like tournaments that are held like maybe throughout like the year coming on online and stuff?
I almost don't think the Sony part has much to do with it, and in fact, if anything, I think Nintendo's probably happy with this outcome. Personally, like, the thing is, like, Nintendo will never publicly acknowledge any of the controversies that have come out, but they're very aware of when really unpleasant stuff goes down that in any way, shape, or form has the name of their product involved. So for them, they don't. I've never seen Nintendo really support a game beyond 2 years. Like Splatoon 2 had support for about 2 years, and then it just kind of ended, right? And same thing with ARMS, and Smash Brothers is getting close to 3, so they've actually supported Smash a little bit longer than they supported their other two games. So I think in general, Nintendo has, if a game is successful, they have about a 3-year plan. It's like, they don't have, to my knowledge, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but to my knowledge, they don't have big official Nintendo-sponsored Mario Kart 8 tournaments.
Not that I can think of, no.
Right.
Like the only like Nintendo game events I remember hearing about or even being at was during E3 when Smash Ultimate was going to be a thing. That was the big tournament they had at E3.
Right.
Invitational, yeah.
And they kept it going at San Diego Comic-Con. They would have like Smash Brother tournaments, little stuff there and stuff. I don't think Nintendo ever had big plans to like keep supporting even Smash Ultimate. I don't think they really had much plans to support it beyond this year. And I think Nintendo, if anything, they probably just kind of are like, look, we've got other things to sell, other things to move on to. I think in Nintendo's mindset, honestly,
they're like, we're good.
We're good. Sony, this is now a Sony venture. We don't really have any. To me, I feel like that's important, though. And I mean, maybe, and again, pure speculation, pure just my own perspective on it. I feel like Nintendo's looking at that. It's one of their competitors that are like now taking a little bit more control or a little bit much more presence at an event, which obviously EVO's the biggest fighting game event, period. Like, people could argue like places like Super Battle Opera and other like fighting game events are huge, like globally wise, but EVO's like the one that everybody knows, and that's like the thing there. And Smash has always had a big like turnout there, always had a big presence there. But I feel like even with that, with just the optics of it, I feel like Nintendo will look at that and be like, you know what, I think we're good. Like let's just move on from there, and let's just like focus, like you said, focus on other things, because we have all these other things that we have on our plate to deal with. And I think that's just something that the Smash community or people, Smash fans that love that competitive scene, are going to have a very tough time coming to terms with. But they may be happy with it, though. I mean, there's probably a lot of people within the Smash community that are absolutely fine with Nintendo not being involved at all. There's another side where they may be looking at, this is net positive for us, but it is a bit of a bummer how it's not at EVO this year, but EVO this year is only online, and for no matter how you feel, the net code in Smash Brothers Ultimate
it's horrible.
garbage.
Bad.
So it wasn't going to be
Yeah.
last year. It wasn't going to be part of their tournament last year, even before anything happened. So because it was online only last year, that's not really any different.
I
This
have an
year,
interesting question though that maybe either one of you guys might be interested in this, because some fighting games, I mean, there are some fighting games on Switch. I mean, we've had like ports of like games that are on multi-platforms and stuff. Do you still think maybe there'll still at least be a presence of Nintendo Switch stuff at EVO despite all this stuff? You know, for some of those games, like, you know, just to think off the top of my head, like, you know, cross tag battle probably being one of them, or, you know, obviously Ultra Street Fighter 2, you know, Street Fighter Anniversary Collection, and again, just there's others that I'm probably forgetting. But do you still think that'll still probably be there in some capacity?
not played on Switches. No.
Yeah, I think it'll be like bullet point stuff. Like if you go, like they ever in person, they have like their kiosk again. They'll be like, oh, it's also available on Switch as well, and you can take it and go. People will probably have Switches. Like there'll be some kind of Nintendo presence there, just because of the people playing their Switch
But on the
their
stage
own.
or like the main events will
but
be like
official
PlayStation,
capacity of that, like maybe at the bottom of that end title card where it says coming whatever and it says Switch, the Switch logo is on there, is the best you'll ever see. But honestly, I understand why people are like there's a very bad history when it comes to Nintendo and the fighting game community, and it's understandable the reservations people have about this statement, because it's a big kind of like non-answer. However, my read on it is it's Nintendo being Nintendo. Like they're just doing, as you said, they're doing what's best, because I don't think it precludes them from ever coming back. Actually, I think it's a multifaceted thing here. One, they don't know. Like obviously, you said it's online. They're not going to participate in an online tournament and have embarrassing Smash online play on display. It makes their product look bad. So they can't return this year. So obviously they can't. They need to say something about it.
Yeah.
Even when EVO comes back to a physical tournament in person, they might want to say, like, how does that turn out? You know, how this new venture, is it going to be successful? I think they're just doing the wait and see game here. Like, hey, we have a year before we have to say anything in an official capacity about it's never going to be there or it's coming back. And you know what? A lot can change in a year. So
That's
I wouldn't
true.
rule it out just yet. But I will say, like, it's not the... Things could be in a better place for the Smash community, though. As you said, Simmons, to wrap my point here, I don't think some of them would mind if this was the end of Nintendo. They walked away from the FGC and but they just turn a blind eye. Like as long as you don't ask us for money, as long as you don't officially we're not an official sponsor, we're gonna look away. Have your little small regional tournaments that do modded Smash and stuff. We just don't care anymore. We're gonna look away from it, but never expect us to come back and give you money or endorse any of this stuff whatsoever.
Yeah. The only unfortunate thing is that because it is now a partially Sony-owned venture, that makes it difficult to foresee in 2022 when it could come back, because they're not doing it online. Yeah. They can't put it on Grand Stage. They cannot advertise, EVO 2022 Grand Stage Finals. Smash Brothers can't be part of that lineup without Nintendo's approval.
That's true.
So that's where it gets a little okay. So if you want Smash Brothers to be part of the marketing material and the promotional material and on Grand Stage, on Grand Finals starting next year, because this year is again online only, and it was never going to come back in regardless of who owns it. You're going to need Nintendo to be okay with that, and that's where it gets a little dicey. Because here's the thing: if you would, Mike, could you read off to me the games at EVO 2021?
Oh,
there's 4, right?
Yeah,
there's 4.
It's Tekken 7, Street Fighter 5 Champion Edition, Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate, and Guilty Gear Strive.
Okay, so everything except MK11, but Tekken 7 had exclusive content for the PlayStation 4 version of the game. Street Fighter 5 is a console exclusive for the PlayStation 4. Guilty Gear Strive is again also a console exclusive for PS4 and 5. And there's a PC version just like Street Fighter. The only one that's kind of an outlier is Mortal Kombat 11. I think that's parity across Sony and Microsoft. But if you notice something there,
it's kind of obvious.
Even with Tekken 7, it's it's a game that actually technically has more exclusive and more content only on Sony platforms. Guilty Gear and Street Fighter are only on Sony consoles. MK is the only but it's MK because it's outside of Smash Brothers, it's the biggest fighting game, franchise in the world. So it already
Let me
kind of
ask you
looks.
this: do you guys think that maybe at some point, maybe like in the next like couple months, right before, do you think that they talk about it a little bit more open? And I mean specifically the EVO people, and people just be like, okay, yeah, we're probably not going to have these games there this year. Maybe we'll look forward to in the future. Like actually talk about it in a little bit much more of like a direct type of way.
Maybe
Because
but I
that
think-
statement is kind of like, again, it feels like a PR statement. And it's like saying something without maybe not saying something completely for some people.
I think it is, because if you look back at 2020's EVO, when they were going to do it online only, I don't know if you have that handy or anything, but like the games that they were going to do last year for EVO were they included Killer Instinct, Them's Fighting Herds, MK11, but they were all very specifically games that had rollback netcode. Very specifically. They were actually EVO before everything came out last year was actually kind of making a strong point that we're not going to run an online event with games with spotty netcode. So games like Tekken 7 were out. Like you needed to have games with
last year's EVO lineup was going to be Dragon Ball Fighters, Granblue Fantasy versus Samurai Showdown, Soul Calibur 6, Street Fighter 5 Champion Edition, Tekken 7.
Now, are you talking?
This is before. This
pre
is
or
that,
post pandemic?
Sorry, this is the pre.
Yeah, that was pre-pandemic.
So that
Like
this is like the
afterwards,
real.
they
This is like this was supposed to be the Marvel vs. Capcom 2
At some
thing.
point, there was going to be an
That was gonna be the big
MVC2
anniversary.
right? There was going to be an MVC2 exhibition, and that didn't happen because they
that's
had
so
to
sad.
change.
And then they had to
everything.
shuffle it all up.
EVO Online 2020. It says Street Fighter 5 Champion Edition. Why does it still have Soul Calibur 6, Dragon Ball, Under Night and Birth?
It was
Tekken
only
7?
it was only like 5 games, and it was like KI.
This is of
Them's
May
Fighting Herds.
15th. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
You got to
EVO
go a little-
Online will take its
little bit
place.
further.
Okay. EVO
But I
Online
get
will
your point,
feature
though, Simmons,
special
like, it makes
exhibitions
sense.
and content from EVO 2020's previous announced lineup. EVO Online will feature open tournaments for the following games: Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat 11 Aftermath, Skullgirls Second Encore, Them's Fighting Herds. Those were the 4.
That
Okay,
was
so
a
that was the
direct
4
shot
games.
across the bow, by the way, at other fighting games that don't have rollback, because those open tournaments that they were promoting originally for last year, those were games specifically about they were taking a huge stand on you need to have good online. Now again, here it's an online only thing, but now Skullgirls and Them's Fighting Herds and KI, they're not part of the conversation. And it's not like a game like Killer Instinct was some vibrant thriving game with updates. Like Microsoft was not updating Killer Instinct last year. There's not been any new content or really like stuff done on that game for years now, but it was being brought back for EVO in 2020 originally for that open tournament, and that is nowhere to be seen now. And Skullgirls actually just announced that they're getting a new season. They have a new character, Annie, in open beta, but it's not part of any. It's not in any way part of this year's EVO. It's only games that are big major brand games that tend to have sort of already have exclusive deals with Sony.
Yeah, leaning towards
So-
PlayStation overall.
Yeah, so I'm like, it already looks a bit like what people are kind of a little afraid of. Like, yeah, Markman says like it's open to all platforms. It doesn't mean
Yeah,
all
but it doesn't say
platforms.
directly. It doesn't openly say like, yeah, you guys are gonna be fine. That was my point I was making earlier. It's like it's both him and Tom and Tony that just not being like straight on about it. I think reading between the lines, everybody could kind of see like what's up.
Yeah.
I will say, even if when it comes back to a physical tournament, not having Smash there will be a bummer because it was just such a hype thing. Like having whichever version. Now, I mean, obviously it'd be Ultimate at this point, but whatever version was on the big stage on the final day was always like exciting to watch. It was always like at the top of the numbers or vying for the top of numbers because obviously Street Fighter and Capcom's legacy, they always got kind of prime billing for the most part at every EVO. So, but when you look at the raw numbers on Twitch, it was like Smash was always up there near the top. And I know there have been like some controversial matches, Bayonetta versus Bayonetta, but there have also been some like really good matchups in there. And even when Melee was still a part of it, Melee was still enjoyable to watch at points, you know, to see some of that drama. So it will be sad to lose variety, to lose big games. So I hope my hope is that there's a way for a path forward that like Nintendo can work out where it's like, hey, we feel comfortable being here despite like Sony is being very open arms. They're like, hey, you can just do it like whatever you want. We'll like meet you at those conditions and stuff, because you know what, I want to have Smash there, because it's exciting to me, especially with like all the DLC characters. Like we've had all these DLC characters come out that haven't been in a tournament like of that caliber. I don't know how viable they are competitively, but I want to see some of these new characters.
Yeah,
I want to see Cloud Sephiroth Grand Finals.
Exciting.
Like, come on. Like,
absolutely. I think there's, you know, a little bit of a tangent here. I'm actually not super thrilled about this acquisition, if you will. And I would like to bring up something that, you know, years ago, not even that long ago, but like a few years ago, there was this really cool event, and it started in Vegas. And it was this fun sort of get together, like a little celebration for gamers to all come together and meet up, meet some new friends, play some new video games, hear some new announcements, and then at the end of it all, we'd all watch a Street Fighter V, you know, tournament final, official for the Capcom Cup. And then it moved year to year, but then it got bigger each year. It got bigger and bigger. You know, more people were coming, more eyes were on it. And again, it was just a great thing to meet up with people and play some new games, hear some new announcements, and then watch some Street Fighter Grand Finals. And then pre-COVID, it mysteriously they just stopped one day. And they never had it again. And that was called the Sony PlayStation Experience.
Oh, I went there. I went to there a couple of times, and I went to the Capcom Pro Tour that they had there.
Right? So this is why I'm actually somewhat nervous. Like, I'm not super jazzed at this buyout, because the PlayStation Experience was not doing poorly. It was getting bigger every year. You know,
it just stopped.
And it just stopped. I mean, Adam Boyes left the company, and I understand it was his baby. And, you know, he was there that the year that he had left Sony, but he was still at the PSX that final year. And then they just stopped doing it because Sony lost, for whatever reason, Sony just completely lost interest. So that has me a little concerned because, man, all the ingredients are there. Like, EVO's a Vegas thing. It ends with a Street Fighter final. It has new game announcements. It's been getting bigger every year. It's been going on. It's exactly like the same thing that was happening on a smaller scale with the PlayStation Experience. And then Sony just one day just decided, we're done. And then just walked away and never came back to it. Never had any hint of coming back to it. And I don't think it's because, maybe that's because they bought EVO. I'm like, I don't think Sony, when they stopped PSX, had any thoughts about EVO. I personally think this was... You know, Sony probably got a good deal on EVO, honestly, after having not been around for a whole year and stuff. So, to me personally, I'm like, this is. I don't know if this is a great thing or not.
It's weird. It just looks weird.
If anything, I'm just worried after what happened with PSX, because PSX was great, and then Sony just stopped doing it. They just gave up for whatever reason. You don't even like
look at that. I mean, most FGC like tournaments like have been grassroots. Obviously, there's baggage with that. Like, the community has not been pristine and stuff. There's having some oversight might help with some of those problems that they've having. Who knows? Like, but there are definitely concerns as well that should be had, because a lot of professionally run, like corporate owned leagues and tournaments don't always go for the they don't turn out for the best. Like this, look at Blizzard in esports. Like, it's like forced down your throats with Overwatch League, and.
What I just wanted
they
to
have like
point
complete
out,
control over their stuff, and it's
Heroes
like
of the Storm is another one,
and it's like there are people who complain about that. They're like, I would rather them like you can't force something to be a thing. Like, you can't make something happen.
You know what it is, though? I think it's just that, not only the people within that community and the figureheads and stuff and those outside of it looking at this stuff, they have to decide what they want it to be and what direction they want to go. Because you can't just say you want to be something and then just not have the path or do in order to get it done like that, because there's a lot of checks and balances. There's a lot of things and a lot of complicated stuff that goes into this. I think that this having someone to come in, put up the money, put up the resources to make these events better for the FGC is a fantastic thing. I think that both easy, not easy, but like, good minds on both sides, have to be able to come and compromise to not only have that authenticity, as far as like making the event is something for the scene and new people to be involved with, while also trying to give it the ability to grow and stuff is what's really going to help this out. I think that, paying attention to a lot of stuff in the past of the past events that, that were tournaments that were ended up not being good because of stuff like that. It's good to pay attention to that, but I think people need to be open-minded to when things like this do happen and look at the positives and look at the potential of it rather than immediately dismiss it from like having to repeat history. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a good mindset to have, but like, man, like we just saw how Blizzard laid off a bunch of their esports division just because they're just like, you guys don't make any money, and that's why I'm like, oh man, I don't know.
And that's why I was saying, like, better minds on both sides have to prevail. Like, people have to be willing to compromise. People have to be willing to listen, I feel like, too.
Well, there's actually a lot of questions we actually still don't really have answered going forward because, again, 2021 is going to be a digital event, and I think that's the right call. That is absolutely the right call. However, going into next year, into 2022, I wonder, does Sony want to stay in Vegas? Like, that's a question that, like, most people probably be like, well, of course. I'm like, well, here's the thing. It's like, if EVO was run by the Cannon brothers, there would be no question. But now you have to sit there and think, well, does Sony want to do it in Vegas? There's other
entities that make decisions now. There's other questions, stuff to be classified.
Do they have rotating cities or something?
Do they have rotating cities?
Exactly.
Yeah, like, there's a lot of things that I think aren't going to be answered this year just because, again, this is another online digital event.
That's a good point. And I think that also speaks to what you're talking about, JakeJames, that like they're still figuring out things, and I think like there's still discussions going on about like what they want to be. And I think after this event, we'll start to get those answers definitively.
Yeah, we'll have a better
start
idea.
to get a better understanding of what directions want to go in. But I will say, like, I'll give this the benefit of the doubt because I do think Sony probably wants this. They want this to succeed. It sounds like they're retaining people to try and keep it like EVO as EVO. Like, they know the people who made EVO, and they don't want to lose that part of it. It just comes down to, like, can they still run it well? Can it still have, when it comes back in person, will it have the game variety that everyone wants? And, as you said, location, like, as long as they're treating it like a spectacle, it's run well, it feels good, and, like, everything's, like, firing on all cylinders.
What do you guys think, like, because again, with PSX, since you brought it up, remember, Capcom Pro Tour hosted their finals or, like, their qualifiers or whatnot, on the way to EVO down the line. What if you think, like, if they actually took EVO and they took it, like, next to an event or a different time frame or a different location, next to something like an E3 or next to something like a Comic-Con? Now, when things get back to somewhat normalcy like that, because that's what happened at PSX, and, it got a lot of attention on that, as well as also the event that was next to them.
That's a great question, except the fact that Sony's been like, I don't care about events pre-pandemic.
True. but it's just something to think about.
That's a great question, except like it's been weird because Sony's like, we're not doing E3, and then like, we're not doing Comic-Con.
That's
like,
very, very true.
They haven't gone for years pre-pandemic. Like, Sony was just sort of like,
Or
like,
PAX. That was the other one I could think of, too.
Maybe, as you said, maybe they do bring back PlayStation Experience, and it's also, this is a part of it. EVO's part of PlayStation Experience, like it's tacked on at the end or something like that.
I'd actually be super down with something.
That'd be dope.
Or,
What's
amazing. Like that'd be it's turning into a massive tentpole for everything. Like maybe that's Sony's their constellation. They're just like, hey, anything could be in the tournament. We have no stipulations. We don't care about marketing anything with the tournament, but like it's always gonna be attached to PlayStation Experience, which is Sony marketing out the wazoo. Like, it's gonna be all about PlayStation. So the week or whatever is really about PlayStation. So there might be a few announcements from other competitors, but it's our thing. I could see that being the big solution, and that's a win-win for everyone in my book if they do that.
For real.
But yeah, we'll see. Only a few months away from EVO Online and seeing what the future holds for EVO. But I think that
I think we might have to wait a year, honestly, to really tell what the future holds.
It's going to be a while.
Because we're just doing this whole online thing, it's almost like we might be talking about this a little too early. Who knows?
Well, it just happened, too. Like, we just got this news yesterday.
It's breaking news.
So fresh.
We got it. People want to talk about it, and obviously the Smash community rightfully has questions, as we've been asking.
Oh, absolutely.
So we'll have to wait and see. But I actually think that's going to do it for this episode. Covered a lot here. I want to thank you both for joining me here. I want to thank everyone of our patrons who submitted questions. A lot of good questions and facts submitted for this episode. If you'd like to submit questions for consideration for episodes of Friend Code, you got to be a $5 and up patron. I'll make a post the week we're recording calling for those submissions. Just know we changed recording times. We're recording on Fridays now, so you actually have a little bit more time. When I put the post at the beginning of the week, you have a little bit more time, but still try and get them in, as soon as you can, because it helps me out, makes my job easier. Thank you to all our $1 and up patrons as well. You get episodes of this podcast, some of our other podcast shows a little bit earlier than $5 patrons. I got that wrong. Correction. Our $5 patrons are also part of our early access tier, where you get this show as well as some of our other podcasts and shows a little bit early. Kind of get that. Thank you to all our patrons, though. $1 and up patrons, thank you so much for being patrons. We also have some special patrons I got to give some shout outs to. These are our $200 and up shout out tier patrons for the month of March 2021. Special shout outs to Althanis, Greg the Dark Knight Kettering, Caleb Togi Crawford, Nick, Stephen Thomason, and Edgar Senpai Black Cover. Shout out. Thank you so much for your support to all of our patrons. Thank you again to both of you. It was a blast having you on, JakeJames. Thank you so much for joining. Hopefully you can be on again in the future.
Anytime, man.
Absolute
Thank
joy.
you for having me.
For people who enjoyed hearing you and stuff, where could they follow you and check out more of your stuff?
Yeah, I'm everywhere, but my main spots is obviously I'm on Twitter at JakeJamesLugo. I'm there every single day sharing stuff. I'm on YouTube as well. I literally upload multiple times a week. It's youtube.com/gamerswithgains channel, or just search Jake James Lugo in the search bar. I do reviews, I do Let's Plays, unboxings, podcasts, a whole bunch of stuff. I just love being part of the conversation about games. It's kind of my thing, and I just love being a part of it all.
Thank you so much, man. And always a pleasure, Simmons. Where can people check out and follow you for more of your stuff?
I run a YouTube channel for youtube.com/YoVideoGames, which is a lot of archival stuff for stuff that I do with Maximilian Dude on Twitch and his YouTube channel. And then I stream as well at twitch.tv/assistmedoom. Those are like the main places to find me. If you want to see me online, streaming, or YouTube.
Nice. Well, until next time, everybody, may the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.